to be for education about asexuality, all things asexual, and I share my asexual life journey in order to help you in yours. If you haven't already subscribed, hit that great big subscribe button for asexual life, asexual information, education, and entertainment. Right here, right now. So we're going to review Spider-Man 3. This is a no sex movie review. So if you didn't already know, I'm asexual. Welcome to this channel. And asexuality is a sexual orientation that's a lack of sexual attraction. So yes, there are people in real life who really don't get the need, urge, or want for partnered sexual intercourse. Now that might seem very strange to the majority of the population, but just like some people don't like Brussels sprouts, some people don't like eating certain types of pizza, not everyone likes sex. So personally, I try to find movies with no sex and personally no nudity in them. And Spider-Man 3 does not disappoint in this way. Spider-Man 3 has no nudity in it, and it has no sex in it. So, yes, if you don't like spoilers, please do not watch this video. But if you haven't already seen the movie and you want to know spoilers, we've already seen it, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll crack on with the video. So Spider-Man 3, this is the original Spider-Man series with Tobey Maguire, I think it is. And anyway, so that's a guy on the back. So right, so this is Spider-Man 3 of the trilogy of the first Spider-Man that came out. Okay, and so what happens in this is this is like the sequel to the first two in the movie. And in this one, this is when the Sandman comes to life and Venom appears as well. So in this video, in this movie, Spider-Man is going to ask Mary Jane to marry him. And his Aunt May gives him a ring for that was her engagement ring to ask for Spider-Man to ask Mary Jane to marry him. And she says basically it's for someone who's can put her first for the rest of his life, take care of her, etc. And he thinks he's ready for it, but he finds out that he's not ready for marriage. And not only does he find out he's not ready for marriage, how he finds out that is kind of like a bit shivering. So he basically comes up against the Sandman. So the Sandman enters this movie, and basically what happens is you find the backstory of the Sandman, and basically it's this guy who actually killed Spider-Man's uncle. And this guy has a daughter who is dying, and he goes to visit his daughter in the beginning of the film, and his presumably wife, the mother of his child, says you're an ex-criminal on the run, you can't stay here, you've got to go. But he just wants to see his daughter, and he'll do whatever he can to save her. So anyway, he ends up going away and running away from the police, and eventually ends up in this like machine scenario, and the machine turns him to sand, so it changes the molecular structure of his body, and that's how he becomes Sandman. And then Spider-Man finds out that this guy killed his uncle and goes after him, and while he's having these really troublesome, distressing nightmares about how his uncle was killed by this guy, he ends up getting this like black slimy stuff that actually goes on a host. So it literally seeps into the body of the host, and it kind of takes over it. And so Spider-Man becomes like this black version of himself, which is like this Venom version of himself. And he starts acting completely out of character, and because revenge takes over him, so the darkness takes over him, which is what this is representing. And he literally goes after this guy Sandman at all costs, and then he gets very full of himself and big-headed, and he allows one of the lab partners, female lab partners, to kiss him in public because he thinks it would be great for his image. And throughout the thing was, I wasn't very happy about this because he allowed her to kiss him, and it was, as far as I remember in the movie, it was before he actually let the black suit completely take it over him that he ended up like having this kiss. And you know, I just thought it was really bad. It was the worst thing about this movie, that Spider-Man cheated on Mary Jane. I thought it was absolutely disgusting, completely out of character, but it was meant to be out of character because he was meant to be going to the dark side, basically. And he has all this romantic meal set up in the restaurant where they're going to play special music and put the ring in a glass so he can propose to Mary Jane. And before he does that, you know, he let this woman who was his lab partner kiss him in public, and it was all over the newspapers. Of course, Mary Jane's really upset, but Spider-Man doesn't seem to even acknowledge the upsetness. He doesn't understand why she'd be upset, because he said he loves her, and he's really taken his eye off the ball. He really doesn't, you know, care about her in that way anymore. He's not attentive to her needs anymore. He's really like full of himself. And there are some really, really funny moments in this film after this, where it's not funny because him and Mary Jane have to split up, and the Goblin's, Green Goblin's son, Harry, who was Spider-Man's best friend, is also Mary Jane's best friend. Harry in this movie is coming after Spider-Man because he believes Spider-Man killed his father. And so you've got the subplot of Harry going after Spider-Man, trying to kill Spider-Man. Spider-Man does actually end up killing the Green Goblin's son, Harry. But Harry does actually come back to life. He comes back to life. He's in hospital. So Spider-Man ends up getting him to hospital and his life is saved. This is partway through the movie. And he doesn't remember what's happened. He has a bang on the head, doesn't remember what's happened. So he then becomes friends again with Spider-Man and Mary Jane, and they're all like best friends again, as though nothing's happened. And the Green Goblin, his dad, can't get in his mind and try to haunt him and take over his mind, which is what he tries to do, put ideas in his head about killing Spider-Man. But, you know, but it ends up being nice again, Harry does. And so, yeah, at this point, you know, he doesn't know who he is. He can't remember that Spider-Man tried to kill him, or that he was trying to kill Spider-Man in the first place. So I did really like the storylines of this, apart from I didn't like the fact he you know, encouraged another woman to kiss him. I thought it was disgusting. I really hated that. I've always hated that about this video, film number 3. I've seen it before and I hated that. I was like, why the hell did they put that in there? You had another girl and you openly did it, and it's before the black suit fully took you over. I was really annoyed about that. But yeah, there are some funny moments in the movie where he's completely like full of himself, and he's like walking along doing dances and, you know, clicking to all the women and stuff like that. And so you know, it's like, it's not what you want to see, really. You know, because of Mary Jane, you know, you really like her as a character, but in terms of like funny bits, it was really, really funny when he's walking down the street and he's trying to do this dancing, trying to look cool with all the women, and his hair's all changed and he's supposed to be like this new, instead of nerdy, trendy guy who's got all the women, but the women in the end get fed up with him, you know. And Mary Jane is meant to be like a Broadway type of star. She's got this performance and then she loses the performance because they don't like her. But instead of Spider-Man being there for her, obviously he's not, because he was kissing that other woman, interested in other women. So she goes and tries to confide in Harry, and, you know, and they get on really well. And then what happens is, they've had a meal together and they're really enjoying each other's company. She's laughing and joking. He's there for her when Spider-Man's, and then they kiss. But then the Green Goblin's dad comes back and he you know, Harry remembers what happened with his dad, and then he changes back into being this like horrible character, goes after Mary Jane, puts her up against the wall and says, you've got to tell Spider-Man it's over, basically, and I'm your other, you know, he then becomes the other guy. So Harry then meets Spider-Man, pretending to still be his friend, and he reveals that Mary Jane has in fact, split up with him because he is the other guy in the relationship. And Spider-Man doesn't want to believe this, and so yeah, they end up in a big fight again. And then the Sandman teams up with a guy who is the newspaper reporter now, because what's happened is Spider-Man as Peter Parker has been covering the story of Spider-Man, but this other guy's got in the Bugle, and kind of like he's the one taking photographs of Spider-Man now, and Peter Parker's been pushed out of it. But what happens is Peter then shows the Bugle that this guy is a con artist. He hasn't really been getting photographs in the end. They're fakes. And so this guy loses his job and no other people will hire him. Meantime, Spider-Man realizes how much he's hurt Mary Jane, and he manages to get this black suit off, black tar thing that's sunk into him as a host, manages to free himself of the darkness inside him, basically. And then this goes on to this tar like stuff drips underneath onto the guy that is the other opposing news reporter who lost his job because Spider-Man revealed he's a fake and a phony. And so then this attaches to him the journalist, that was working at the Daily Bugle, and it attaches to him as a proper suit like this, and he becomes Venom. And then Venom teams up with the Sandman to go after Spider-Man to try to kill him. And Spider-Man eventually goes to Harry and says, look, I cannot do this without you, because what happens is Mary Jane's held as a hostage. Sandman and Sandman and what's it called? Sandman and Venom, they team up together, and so Sandman and Venom hold Mary Jane hostage in a taxi, but they put her in a great big web, like a spider's web, and hang her from some buildings, so she's dangling there, and this is to lure Spider-Man. But Spider-Man goes to Harry and says, look, I can't do this without you. I can't take on them both, and we need to both save Mary Jane because we both care about her, we both love her, basically. And so anyway, Harry's like, there's no way I'd help you. So Spider-Man has to go alone. And then Harry's brother, Harry's butler, servant, whatever you call, basically the guy who looks after him, because his father's died. Harry's, servant, if you like, he tells Harry the truth that his dad died by his own piece of machinery, basically. Spider-Man did not kill his father. So in the end, Harry ends up going to the scene to help Spider-Man, and they have to defeat Sandman and Venom together in the end. But there are very, very tragic consequences for Harry. Very tragic consequences. So if you don't want the ending spoiled, then don't watch this bit, but I'm going to spoil it now. So in the end, Harry saves Spider-Man and Mary Jane by taking the fall and getting in the way of them so that they're not injured, but he is. And yeah, basically Venom's got this metal like sword things. I think it's sword things. Anyway, it pierces Harry both, sides of his chest through this back, and he dies in the end. And so in this movie, Harry dies twice. Once he dies and comes back to life, and then he dies again, saving his best friends as a hero. So it's very, very weird that he dies and comes back and then is dead again at the end of the movie. If you've never watched a movie before, you probably won't be expecting that, because you think he's died once and they brought him back, great, and then he's died again. But I suppose it's a bit like Avengers, with what happens to, for example, Iron Man, that is my favourite character. If you don't want this spoiler, then don't watch this video. But basically, Iron Man comes back to life, doesn't he? In the you know, the end game. He comes back to life for the end game, and then he ends up dying completely in the end. And so, you know, I find it very horrible when they do that and they bring back the character and you're like, yes, they're alive, thank God they brought them back, and they're like, no, they're dead again, but this time it's permanent. I just really hate that. You know, it's quite upsetting, really. But yeah, so that's what they do with Harry. But I do think it is a good movie overall. No sex, no nudity, but there is romance between Spider-Man, Mary Jane, and Harry and Mary Jane. They're all kind of a three-way triangle at one point. And you know, and there is kissing, proper full-on kissing with Mary Jane and Spider-Man in the beginning of this movie, when they're actually first together, and he's a good guy in the beginning of this movie. And I really do like that because I'm romantic, and I thought it was good to see them full on snogging, because in the kind of the earlier movie you don't really see, it's kind of like, will they get together, won't they get together, and you know, and like you know, like by the end of movie 3 they're full on meant to be into each other at the beginning, and at the beginning he's a really nice guy, but like I said, the darkness took him over, ego came out, and it wasn't good. But in the end he comes good in the end. And the very, very, very end bit, because he has trapped Mary Jane really badly, he humiliated as well, because he brought a new girlfriend along, which was the woman he kissed, and all the papers were taking photographs of it. He goes to where she's singing as a jazz bar, I think it is. It's a bar anyway. She's a singer / waitress, and he goes and just shows off, and instead of Mary Jane carry on singing, he goes and shows off and does all this dancing in front of people, all these like thrusting of the body. And the woman he's with, who you know, kissed him, who was his lab partner, and he told her to, which gave him more publicity, she said, oh, all this show was just a show for your ex, for Mary Jane. And she walks up to Mary Jane and she apologizes for, I guess, for her being there and for his bad behavior, and she leaves because she can see what an asshole he is in this bit. And so he did really humiliate her, and what happened was he gets really angry and starts smacking people, and he ends up accidentally hitting Mary Jane, and so that's really horrible. So when Harry and Spider-Man team up to help Mary Jane, you know, and they do save her life, and Harry dies, you know, they both, Spider-Man and Mary Jane, kind of go to the funeral. They look like they're separate, but where it ends is he walks into where she's working, and he takes her, held his hand out for her to take it, and she does, so you know that they're going to continue being together after that, you know. But it's kind of an emotional roller coaster. I did really get upset in this. I did shed a few tears, you know, but I do think it's a well thought out film. It's very long. It's nearly 3 hours long. And so, yeah, if you want a long movie that's got quite a lot of stuff in action and storyline and good versus evil not winning but losing in the end, that type of thing, then I think you'll love this movie. So do go and rent it, to go and buy it. It's well worth it. And I'll see you on the next video live stream. If you've already seen it, please pop a comment down below. Love to know what you think. As always, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell icon so you get notified of every time I go live. Right now, I'll post a new video. Lots of love to you. Bye. Bye. Bye.